Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be talking about some throwing and catching games that you can deliver in your primary PE lessons. So I've got 6 lessons for you today, and then I'm going to tell you my favourite one at the end and go into a little bit more detail on that certain one. But to start with, the first one's going to be fives. Now this game works, it's quite simple, you just have your area. Now for most of your PE lessons, you want to just make sure you have plenty of space. You've got 30 children normally in a PE lesson. So maybe if this was a netball court, you would probably have, let's say you got a netball court here like this, and ideally, you probably want to be using at least 2/3, maybe 3/3 if you think your voice can travel that far. So imagining we're just using 2/3, we're going to go into these 2/3 here, and all it is a game of fives. So all 30 children are around the area. Okay, and you're going to give like 15 balls into that area. So 50% of however many children you've got. Now let's say this person has a ball. Now they are going to work with somebody and they've got to make 5 passes. Now you might start your session with any passes that you like, just simple little underarm throws or overarm or whatever you like. It's 5 passes. I'll use a blue for that. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the end of the 5 passes, they have to go and work with another partner. So it's really good socially for them to go, 5 passes and then move and work with somebody else rather than just stay in their comfort zone. Also, it gets them to experience, different people's throws and catches and stuff like that. So once you've done 5, you go to the next person. This is great, but it can get a little bit boring if there's no sort of added bit into it. So maybe that could be your starter, and then you could say, right, now I'm going to give you 1 minute, and it's actually 1 minute of them seeing how many different partners they can work with in that time. Now when you say you're going to give children a minute or 2 minutes to do whatever, just actually put it on your watch and make sure that they get a minute, especially if you're then going to say, right, I'm going to give you another minute, and you're going to see if you can beat that record, because if the time isn't fair, obviously they're going to beat their record if they've got twice as long, or they're not going to meet it if they've got half the time. So yeah, just make sure you do that. So that's your game of 5s. It works really nicely, especially if you've got 30 children. They can all start moving around, interacting safely together. And it's a nice sort of warm up to any throwing and catching game. If it's a certain sport that you're delivering, it might be you're working on passing. All of these games are very relevant to passing as well. So that's one game. The next game that we're going to go into is a game called Through the Gate, and Through the Gate is a very simple lesson that you'll see in lots of the different national governing bodies, like this level 1 course. All very simple activity. Now you'll create your area. In your area you can create lots of different gates. Again, if you've got 30 children, you want to create about 15, 20 gates. You want there to be lots of different gates. And you see what I'm doing here is I've lined out my area with black cones, for example. Now I'm not then going to make all of my gates with black cones, because then it doesn't define the area nicely. So just making sure that I use one set of cones for the area, or this might even just be lines on the playground, and then I use my cones from that. If I put too many blue cones all together, then it's not going to be clear which is the gate. So it might be you have a few different coloured cones, and then you can put your red in there as well, and just scatter the whole area. And then with your players, they're going to be in pairs now, pairs or threes. And let's say that this player here has the ball, and this player here is his teammate. They've got to pass it through the gate, and then they've got to go and find another gate. Okay, so once they pass through one, they have to go and find another gate. With the younger ones, you might say you can just run with the ball and go and find a gate and pass it through. It's absolutely fine. With the older ones, it might be, okay, right, you're not allowed to run with the ball, so now you might have to run over here. This person passes it to you. They then run up over here, and then the ball can get passed through that gate. So little ways that you can expand it, make it a little bit more difficult. Obviously within this, you can change up the techniques. You could say it has to be caught with one hand, or it has to be, a throw above head height, or whatever it is. All these different restrictions that you can put in, and just make the session, progress it for those who need it, or regress it if people are struggling at all. My next game is a game that the kids absolutely love. It's called Crocodile Swamp, and it's just one of those games which is very similar to when I just have like two kids just passing the ball back and forth forever. Now, that is obviously one of the most boring games you can do, but this Crocodile Swamp game makes an adaptation of that to allow you to do this for 15, 20 minutes with the kids still absolutely loving it. So, Crocodile Swamp, you're going to create your swamp. Now, this is my swamp, for example, here, and your swamp can be as wide as you need it to be. For the older age group, it's going to be a little bit wider than the younger age group, of course, and you're going to just go work them in their pairs. Again, if you've got 30 children, this can be the whole netball court all the way down or whatever you want to do. And you're going to have a crocodile who is here. Okay, that is my crocodile, although that doesn't look like a crocodile. Okay, so it's a C for crocodile, and what we're trying to do is just pass the ball across the swamp as many times as we can. So there's passing it across, all passing it across with their teammate. Okay, and whilst that's going on, the crocodile is moving up and down the swamp trying to intercept the ball. Now, if he does intercept the ball, he's just going to get it and just roll it away, so they have to go and get it. Okay, it's not going to be like get it and throw it at the other side of the school, but just think about moving into these different spaces, the crocodile intercepting the ball and just moving it away. So it's just like a game for these guys to try and pass the ball across without the crocodile getting it. Your progressions from this can be adding more crocodiles. You're going to be talking about your throwing and catching, for example. You're going to be thinking about the different throws that you're using. Are you going to be doing overarm, underarm? It might be that, depending on the size of the ball you're giving them, if you're giving them a small like tennis ball or rounders ball, it's different to if you're using a basketball or maybe a frisbee or whatever it is. So think about mixing up your equipment. You can do the same game but just with different equipment, different size swamps, different crocodiles, different techniques, all that sort of stuff to really just work on the throwing and catching. And like I say, rather than just passing the ball back and forth, which is like so boring for the kids, they're doing the same thing but in a fun way, and they're looking out for the crocodile. And my last tip on this game is that if you do have an odd number, just put them on the outside here or add another crocodile. Never put adults with the children, because it just stops that adult being able to work with the other 29 children in the group. So if I just had a triangle on at the end, now these children are passing that way round, they're still getting the exact same out of it. But rather than using that teaching assistant who could be helping 29 other children, let's get them in threes, and don't worry about it has to be a 2, because it doesn't have to be a 2, it can be a 3, it still works. So yeah, that's Crocodile Swamp. Next up is a game called Battleships. The children are really going to like this game, and the way it works is that each child is maybe in groups of 2s or 3s. Again, 3 is your magic number. You don't want to go above 3 because it ends up with just kids waiting around for too long. It becomes boring and they don't have a positive experience with sport. So make sure they're active all the time. Maximum group of 3, and this player, for example, has to try and throw a beanbag or a tennis ball or a netball or whatever it is and try and hit one of their battleships, one of their cones. So if they throw it over and they hit that cone then becomes that player's battleship. So now they've got 4 battleships and they've only got 2. It will be this person's go next. If they throw it and they miss, obviously they don't get a battleship. It'll be this person's go next. They might hit a battleship and they bring it over to their side. And that's basically how it works. So thinking about how you can make this more difficult, we can make a bigger distance between our battleships. So for example, if you put 3 together, it may be a little bit easier, but they might go like 1, 2, 3 and just separate it a little bit more. So you have to be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more specific on where you're throwing it. Again, technique, it might be that you have to, you started with a nice, easy underarm technique, and now you're going to go for a chest pass technique, or overhead, maybe the distance is going to be bigger. Whatever you can think of to just make it a little bit harder. Or again, if it needs to be easier, can you use bigger cones? Can you use a bigger ball? Can we make the area smaller? Just work with your children. Again, if I've got 30 children, I'm going to have 10 lots of this. It might feel like it's more difficult to manage 10 groups than just one, one event going on. But actually, if you explain it well, the children will understand, and it works really well. Just be aware if this kid gets their last battleship taken away, think about what you're going to do to make sure they still have a positive experience in their PE lesson. So they probably need to be still involved in some way or another. It might be that someone's going to lend them a battleship. It might be that they still take part and they can take out other people's battleships, or they could regain it back into their side. Whatever works, but don't just allow this kid to just be the loser, because if they're not the best in the class normally, and then they just have a negative experience of becoming the loser and they don't get to play, not only they're not playing, but then the other children who are good are just going to keep getting better and better, and the gap gets bigger and bigger. So yeah, always think about when you're playing out games and stuff like that where they have lives, how you're going to make sure they're still active in the game. Okay, amazing. So now what we're going to do is a game of Piggy in the Middle. Now this is a favourite playground game. It's been on the playgrounds for years, but how we can use this in a PE lesson to really help us with our throwing and catching. There's so many different things you can do with Piggy in the Middle. Again, with this, I think 3 is the magic number. Obviously with Piggy in the Middle, you can probably go up to 4, but if you go up to 4, maybe see what the group is like, but if you just make it so that this player's the piggy and they've got a triangle, it makes it quite hard for the piggy. So what you could do is say, right, these 2 are piggies when they have the ball, and then when these 2 have the ball, then these become piggies, and so it's like 2 versus 2. But yeah, the Piggy in the Middle works really nicely. What we're going to have is, I'm just going to imagine we've only got 3 for this one. We've got our piggy in the middle here, and the rule is that this person isn't allowed to move with the ball. So thinking about this player maybe creating some space for themselves and coming over here and catching the ball. This player obviously is allowed to move, can't take the ball out of the hands, but can intercept it. If you want to make this a little bit harder, because sometimes what they do is they just do a big loopy throw over the top of the piggy, and the piggy doesn't have a chance, especially if you've got 2 tall kids compared to a smaller kid. So my advice on that might be that we say, right, you have to have underarm throws. It has to be under the head. So if you think about, right, then they haven't got an advantage of throwing it over the top. So it has to be like chest passes or throws which are going to be below head height, and then it just makes this player think about moving off the ball a little bit more. Again, I've got 30 children. I'm doing this across the whole netball court. They've got plenty of space, and just making sure they're moving nicely, getting into space. If you're finding the piggy is the same piggy, then it might be you need to say, right, okay, swap the piggy, or maybe even after 10 successful passes, the piggy swaps out. Okay. If you have got, and I guess this is like another little bonus coaching tip or teaching tip. If you have got 30 children and you're putting them into threes, just think about how you might do that, because if you've got 10 weaker children, you've got 10 average children and 10 excellent children in terms of their sporting ability. If you partner a weaker with an average with an excellent, then what you're going to end up finding is that weaker player is the piggy all the time. So if you do play games like this, just aim to put like the stronger players with or the stronger children with the stronger children, and then the weaker children with the weaker children. And then that way, if I'm brand new to throwing and catching, I can still have a really positive experience in my PE lesson, because I'm working with other children who are on the same sort of level as me. And I think that's a massive thing. A lot of the time in a school environment, maybe the person delivering PE is actually, that they've gone into that career and they love PE. So in doing that, they probably had a positive experience at school when they were younger, because they were always the best in the class and stuff. So a lot of the time, people you see teaching were really good at PE, and they don't necessarily think about the weaker children in the group. So always thinking about the weaker children in the group and those who are new to throwing and catching and stuff like that. How are they going to have a positive experience in your lesson as well? And a lot of it goes into thinking about your teams and how you're partnering people together. Okay, so that game is Piggy in the Middle. Finally, like I said, my favourite game, and this is an absolute classic for like lunchtime games, after school clubs, but it works quite well for PE lessons as well. And it's a game called Clear My Garden. And the way this works is you've got a whole area here, and I put I've got half the class over here and half the class over here. So I've got 15 versus 15, and I'm going to throw in on this side, you know, about 20 bibs. Actually, it depends on what you're using, but if I put bibs in here, for example, bibs are great because you can like fully throw a bib as hard as you can, or if you're American, a penny, and you can throw that penny or bib as far as you can, and it's not going to like end up on the other side of the school. If you're using like tennis balls, for example, or something that, like a bouncy ball, it can end up that kids aren't spending that much time throwing, and more time is actually spent going to get the balls and stuff. But if you use bibs, it's really good. They just basically, the red player has to go and pick up one bib, and they got to throw it over to that side. Okay, you weren't expecting that, were you? Okay, right, so let's fix that. Now on this side, and everybody's allowed to go at the same time. So that scared the life out of me, you know. All right, so then as I throw it over here, and this person's throwing it over there. Now, obviously, this team is coming over and they're throwing the bibs back over to their side. And it's basically a game of who can get all the bibs over to the other side. And this game works because they are literally throwing the bib or the balls or whatever it is, like for like so many times within 1 minute, and at the end of 1 minute you count down 3, 2, 1, really strict on and making it loud and clear when they need to stop, and when you say stop they must put their hands on their head and walk back to their line. You've got to be really careful that kids don't just keep throwing the bibs even when you say stop, because then obviously it's not fair and then they throw the bibs back over and it just ruins the end of the game. So just making sure that you say stop and the children go back. But this Clear My Garden game works so well, and I don't know many other games where you're going to see as many throws within like 1 minute as Clear My Garden. Okay, so that's my one of my favourite games to deliver in PE, where you know it's just a little warm-up game as well. You can just get lots of throws in that game. Again, working on different techniques, might be underarm, overarm, but it helps with just everybody's having a positive experience, especially if they're throwing bibs. You know, they're not going to get hurt and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully one of these games that you maybe take a fancy to, and you can go and try in your next PE lesson. And like I say, a lot of them are very related to passing and any other sport where passing is involved, and you can adapt it to the lesson that you're delivering. But yeah, lots of little coaching points in there as well, different ways how you might manage, thinking about the magic number of 3 and making sure that children aren't playing against like unfair abilities and stuff like that. So it's everything you're doing in your PE lesson is to make sure children have a positive experience in sport. We need children to have a positive experience in PE, especially in primary school, so they go on to lead healthier lives. And that helps. And you know, this just throwing and catching the video is just put together to make sure that more children across the world have positive experience. So if you like what we're doing, please do give us a like and subscribe. And yeah, and we'll see you in the next video.